Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to How to Raise a First Institutional Round. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a program manager at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit that's building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. As you may have just seen in the chat, the Nasdaq Center, along with our partner Mentor Cloud, launched a free mentor matching platform for entrepreneurs called Mentor Makers. You can create your own advisory board to guide and inspire you with in-the-moment mentorship from topic experts and professionals dedicated to providing exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So find or become a mentor today by using the link in the chat. Mentorship matters to all entrepreneurs. Their success is dependent on it. Quick housekeeping item, we're going to open up for a live Q&A at the end of the event, so please submit those questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. We hope to get to them all. Now, none of what we do here at the center would be possible without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, HubSpot, and BPM. We're humbled and grateful for their contributions. Now, during these still unique times, we're curious on how sentiment is among the entrepreneurs that we work with. So I'm going to start by just taking a quick poll to let us know, how are you feeling about your business right now? Are you optimistic? Are you just surviving? Let us know. And also the second question, what's keeping you up at night? That one helps inform the programming that we're going to be hosting for you, the entrepreneurs that we serve, in the future. So let us know. I know we've got a lot of great content today, so I don't want to waste too much time here, but appreciate your responses. These totally will help me and our panel know where you're worrying about. So thank you very much. Looks like optimism is at the top of the key, but totally understand that there's a little bit of anxiety, survival mode, and fear out there. Looks like, well, we're all here for a conversation on venture capital. So finance is at the top, which is no surprise. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our panel. First of all, our moderator, Donna Pawar, is our moderator, and she's also an angel investor, a product executive, and she's a center advisory board member here at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. So stoked to have you, Donna. Donna will be joined by Roli, Saxena, president at Role Business, Next Role, investing partner, and at Neythri Futures Fund. We've got Stephany Kirkpatrick. She's the founder and CEO of Aurum. And we've got Peter Hazlehurst, who's the co-founder and CEO of Syncterra. Welcome, panel. Donna, over to you. So excited for this conversation. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. I think that was one of the best intros. So thank you so much. And super excited to be here. I'm Donna Pawar. I'm going to be your moderator for this event. And just to add on to what Colin said, I've been an advisory board member for the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center since its inception for over 6 years now. And I recently became a founding LP or limited partner at the Neythri Futures Fund, which is co-hosting this event. So I'm even more excited to be moderating this panel, as it's the first time both of my worlds are colliding. So super excited. And that brings me to this incredible panel that has the panelists have successfully made the transition from working for larger companies to now successfully raising institutional money. There's just been so much talk around fundraising, and yet it's still a bit of a mystery as to what it really takes. And I truly cannot think of a better panel to share their fundraising journey and lessons learned with you all today. So without further ado, I would love to call on the panelists for introductions. Roli, should we start with you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Colin, for a great start. Hi, everyone. I'm Roli Saxena. I'm president of the Role Business Unit. We are a marketing technology company focused on e-commerce brands. And I'm also an investing partner at Neythri Futures Fund. So a little bit background about Neythri. It's a relatively new fund, a $10 million fund. We launched it in October, focused specifically on creating and accelerating opportunities for South Asian women in the venture community. We have over 90% of our limited partners from South Asian descent, so women from South Asian descent. So Donna, we're so happy to have you part of our community. And we are focused on investing in tech and tech-enabled companies with founding teams and the executive teams that are diverse. So our mission and purpose is to really create opportunities for people who've been left out of the venture community for way too long. And so excited to be here. We're also very fortunate to have both Orem and Synctera, Stephany and Peter, as part of our portfolio, and excited to be part of their journey.
Thank you, Roli. No, that was awesome. Stephany, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. Roli and Peter, it's so good to be here with you today. And Donna, excited for the conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Orem. At Orem, our vision is to power a better financial system where everyone has the freedom to build to their potential. And as a certified financial planner, you'll hear throughout the conversation kind of how that's played into my founder's journey. I've always spent time thinking about how do we modernize the system that we have? So Orem's core focus today is modernizing money movement, and very specifically helping money move in real time in all directions. So you can imagine lots of use cases in your life, but the easy way to think about it is the simplicity of what Amazon's brought to your front door for package delivery is how we think about getting bank transfers from point A to point B as quickly as possible. And I'm excited to share sort of what it's felt like to be in the founder seat, raising capital over the last, year and a half and building a business and a company. Hopefully I can translate some of my learnings into concrete things. I feel like I'm still figuring it out, but happy to share what's been working for us and dig in on the questions today.
Cool. I'm excited. Peter, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Colin and Dana, for the first introductions, and super fun to be on stage again with you, Stephany and Roli. Seem to be intersecting in lots of places, which is really great. I'm founder and CEO of Synctera, and our business is to create a marketplace where it's really, really easy to build a fintech. Think of a neobank for pets. Everybody loves their pets. And on the other side of the marketplace are community banks. And we make it super easy for people to build and create the next generation of interactions that you have with your money. Stephany is one of the sorts of partners that we work with that'll help us move that money from A to B. But think of us as all the glue and the stitching required for a founder who doesn't know anything at all about banking to launch a neobank. And similarly, on the community bank side, bringing the community banks out of just branch banking and local services and starting to participate in the fintech economy. I'm an old school fintech nerd, having been here since '93 when I did my first startup, which we built the core banking system called Phoenix, which, believe it or not, went public on the Nasdaq in like 1996. And since then, it's been sold like 5 times. So been there, done that in terms of founding companies and getting started. And the last couple of years have been really extraordinary for fundraising. So happy to share what we've learned and answer any questions people may have.
That's great. We already have questions popping up in the chat. We have so many questions that have already been submitted. I'm sure this is going to be a great panel, and we don't have a lot of time. So I would love to get started, maybe with you, Stephany. Just talk to us about your journey, right? Your founder journey, and maybe just highlight a few sort of gotcha moments that you had along the way, good or bad.
Oh man, there's good ones and bad ones all mixed in. These stories are always fun to tell. I think what you believe is true about fundraising, what you find is actually true, are two different things. So hopefully I can demystify it. As I reflect back on my background, I started my career in tech about 10 years ago, and I was inside an early stage company called LearnVest, which is ultimately where I kind of got bitten by the bug to pursue a path of being in both an entrepreneurial seat and ultimately in startups for much of my career, or as it came to be, leading corporate innovation and launching new businesses for big brands like Northwestern Mutual, SoulCycle, Equinox, et cetera. And, ultimately, as I kind of thought about the founder journey, I'll be honest, I don't know that everyone wakes up and is like, oh, today's the day. I'm a founder, I'm ready. And I didn't wake up that way. In fact, what happened is I was thinking about the idea that I wanted to solve, kind of backing into my roots as a financial planner. I know if we can get people to do more good things with their money, we can have better economic success in America. And it's not behavior change. What is it? Right. And like every good founder, I sat with this problem for a very long time and finally started talking about it. And as I did, I went back to the former founder and CEO of LearnVest, who then had raised a venture capital fund, and just, here's what I'm thinking about. What do you think? Give me your thoughts. And through that, she ended up deciding to write what Inspired Capital calls an inspiration check, which is a very small check, let's be clear, to help you take the leap of faith of leaving a paid, stable job. I have kids, I have a mortgage, I have a real life. I'm no longer luxuriously 26 and free and clear of all obligations. And that inspiration check helped put us in a place where I could put my head down full time and think about problems like the ones we're solving for Orem. And through that, ultimately put us on a path to be able to go raise institutional capital more holistically, to really then begin to build up the business. And there are some crazy stories. We didn't raise institutional capital until March, April timeframe is when we started to kind of go out to market, ultimately like really firmly in market May of 2020. So where were all of us? We were all sitting in the same spots we're probably still sitting in today, but with way less knowledge of what was about to happen in the world. And I joke about this often, but it's also true right now. Like all of a sudden you're like, I'm at my desk and I'm working and I'm thinking, but I'm not wearing shoes. Like that's so weird, right? Like I got dressed, but I never put shoes on. I never like, and for some reason that comes back to me as I think about the fundraising journey where I'm like, I'm literally talking to the most sophisticated investors and I'm not wearing shoes. But ultimately, I think what was really powerful about my experience, because it was very early in the pandemic, is that this concept of fundraising remotely was absolutely new to everybody. Fast forward to today, it's less new. It's more practiced. But the venture capital teams were also going through their same oh shit moments of, is it Zoom? Is it WebEx? What if Zoom's down? What if somebody Zoom bombs in? And everything in between. And so I think we were actually all put in a place where we had to learn through it together. And there's some great cheat sheets of having, our setup this way, right? I can just quickly move my mouse and remember every partner's name that's on the call, right? I didn't have that luxury in like the real life setting. So I know Peter's going to want to say a bit too, and there'll be some stories in here, but I think one that I'll leave you guys with is when I got my first term sheet. An incredible New York-based venture capital firm has a history of coming into your offices, right? And they wanted to carry that. And they did this incredible experience via Zoom. And I felt like, wow. And then they said, hey, go check your front porch, take the camera, take the computer. And like, you're like now on a house tour and like, you're like, okay. And I go out to my front porch and there were two of the partners from this fund basically in my front yard. Now, this is the one day that not only did I not wear shoes, I also had like thrown on a shirt maybe early in the morning because, you're up all night. And I absolutely did not have like work appropriate pants on. And there's photographs of all of this. And I'm wearing like bright blue SoulCycle, workout pants with holes in it by design. And there they are, masks on. And we're all like, it's May of 2020. Do we even come close to each other? And they brought a term sheet and champagne. And I honestly thought it was like a marriage proposal. I cried a little. I was so emotional. And I think it just reminded me that the human spirit of building businesses is absolutely thriving, will survive, did survive the pandemic, and that there were going to be ways, not always exactly like that, to experience human connection, which is ultimately what drives for me the decision-making and who I want around the table, because raising money is not about the cash. It's about the people that come sit on your board, that back you through hard times, through good times, that push you. And so that is one of the many, many crazy stories. I'll probably work a few more in there where I felt like I was completely out of my element and yet also exactly where I was supposed to be, which was just experiencing it as it was happening.
That's incredible. Oh my God, what a great story. And it still blows my mind when I hear about stories like $100+ million raises, all during the pandemic without ever forget about meeting the VCs, but even the co-founders have not met each other in person, which just blows my mind.
That was true for us. My technical leader, I had never met. And there were some folks in venture who understandably were like, we can't back a company where the founding team is not met. And we're like, okay, understand. Yeah. But we also can't meet. So here we are. And so, yes, that's been absolutely true for us.
Cool. Peter, I'd love to hear your experiences and just, your journey as a founder and what brought you here.
Yeah, totally. I'll double down on the shoes argument. So I've had a standing desk since 2011 when I worked at Google. And you're always in the office and you're wearing shoes, right? And finally we pandemicify ourselves and we move home. And I still have my standing desk, but I was getting incredible foot pains because I was barefoot. Flip-flops. I have standard set of flip-flops that sit here under my standing desk. And it's just like, life is much better. But anyway, so I had a pretty fun gig at Uber prior to starting Synctera. And one of the things that we did was create a neobank for drivers. We called it Uber Money. And as we built that service, it became really clear that to do it, if you had Uber style resources where I had lots of lawyers, lots of BD people, lots of engineers and so on, it was not so bad, but it was still pretty crappy. And as I was thinking about what to do next, you know, the pandemic had changed Uber's trajectory and I was thinking about what to do. Along came this opportunity to incubate and grow a compliance software company. And I was like, no. I'm sure there are some people that love building compliance software companies, but not me. And the lead investor was a really fun guy, and we had a good chat. And he's like, "What do you think of your idea?" And I said, "Not the greatest idea, but if you could maybe think about creating a marketplace," and because I was marketplace in Uber, and everything's a marketplace. We're in a marketplace right now. It was this really interesting dynamic. He's like, "All right, would you want to go do that?" And I was like, "Sure." And so with that, we had pre-seed funding, which was cool, but like we needed a founding team. And there were these two co-founders that were sort of slightly associated with this business that I hadn't met until I realized, all right, I can't do this if I haven't met them in person. So it's like August of 2020. And we looked up the COVID maps to figure out the least COVIDed city. And it turned out it was Boulder. So we flew, and one of my co-founders flew from Toronto, which was ridiculously difficult, including a 14-day, had to stay in a hotel afterwards, nonsense. One flew from Chicago and I flew from San Francisco. And then we're all masked up and we have our first meeting at the WeWork, and there's like designated seating spots that are not too close to each other. It was really fun. And then we're like, guys, we have to have dinner or something. So we went to this fun restaurant and up on the mountain looking down, and it was great. And we said, all right, I've seen your eyes. I know what you look like. You want to do this? And they were like, sure, let's do it. And then we went, and so we spun up the business in September, and I had previously talked to a bunch of investors about, like, if I left Uber, what would you do? And it was nice. There were lots of folks saying, just call, we'll see. But when all came to done, the first funding round was a pretty fun process, which we can talk about later. But the tipping point for me, which wasn't a marriage proposal, unfortunately, Stephany, but it was in fact that so we had two equal term sheets, like pretty close. I mean, lawyers, language difference, but all the economics were the same. And one of the investors figured out that I like the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so I had a final line in the term sheet that says, "And we will go to the opening game." And I was like, "You win, done." And that was it. So sometimes you just go with your gut. And I think the market of how you interact with investors is really, really different. But it all comes down to what Stephany was mentioning, which is you're building some sort of trust dynamic. And if you feel remotely squeamish, or it's even just slightly off, doesn't matter if they're going to give you more money, who cares? Because when shit breaks, you don't want to second guess, well, can I tell this person, you know, like, this deal didn't work out. I know we were betting the farm on that deal. You want to have that relationship where you can just call them and say, dude, I need your help. And know that they're not going to judge you on the other side of that trade. So for me, starting Synctera was super fun. Surprisingly, I think more efficient to fundraise during COVID with Zoom.
Yes.
Saved a lot of time and allowed us to talk to funds that otherwise we would have never spent time with. And so that was really cool. I like that part about it. The downside was that final, like, human connection was quite hard to navigate. Now it's completely okay, but back then it was quite difficult.
It's great. We have, again, as I said, so many questions. Oh my God, I'm loving this. There's just so many great nuggets that I've received, like that I've actually learned already. Roli, let's flip the script a little bit. We've talked to two founders, raising funds during the pandemic, fascinating experiences. You as a funder, I would love to hear just your journey, your experience as a funder, and also maybe talk a little bit about what you've been looking for in startups, right? Things have changed a lot pre-pandemic and now during the pandemic. So would love to just hear your experiences as a funder.
Absolutely. By the way, I met both Stephany and Peter during the pandemic, and we still haven't. We've had many conversations, but we still haven't seen each other in person. We should change that.
We should.
And we should clarify Neythri Futures Fund is invested in both companies. So
that's right. That's right. So my journey was actually as an investor was very organic. I really started off as an angel investor and an LP. And for me, it was fascinating for someone who's been in the industry for a long time, have a really good sense of what have been in startups that have been part of two startups that have actually were acquired, and two startups that went IPO. So I've seen that journey many times before. But for one reason or the other, I found myself in a place that I was not invited into investing for many, many years, right? So my husband, we would be in the same dinner table and the same party, and my husband would be invited into investing, and they would completely ignore me, right? And that would happen with me, my work colleagues. It was like all the time. And so somehow it was really hard, but I did break into angel investing and, was able to really invest in about 40 companies. But I knew the challenges of what it takes to really break into investing and why South Asian women have just never been able to get into it. So in Neythri, the general partner of Neythri Futures Fund, she came to me about 18 months ago and shared the vision that she had with Neythri Futures Fund. It just really resonated with me, right? It was exactly what I had felt and exactly what I'd been seeing a lot of other South Asian women feeling as well. And so we really wanted to create a fund focused around that. And we could have gone out and done a bunch of, large institutional organizations investing in our fund as LPs, but we chose to really, really give the opportunity. And so we have, like I said, of the 249 LPs, 90% of those are South Asian women, who many of them have never been part of any fund or any sort of in the venture ecosystem. So really, for me, it's the mission plus the experience around angel investing is what brought me here.
Oh, that's great. And I love how you talk about the fund. And I just wish, the attendees take away not just about how to raise an institutional round, but maybe also learn, about just how to be a funder with some of the nuggets that we hopefully will glean today. So let me actually jump right into just a bit of like tactical learnings here, right? So this is for Peter and Stephany. How did you guys know that, when to do your first fundraise, right? Because there's just so many options out there, not just in terms of like who to go after, but when to actually raise your first round. And that's, I think, a question that I see constantly with companies that I work with, the startups that I work with. So Peter, maybe we can start with you. Like, how did you know, okay, this is it, I need to raise funds now?
In our case, we were fairly convicted on what we were going to build, and what we were going to build required a lot of capital to get started. So it was almost a foregone conclusion. We knew we needed $8 to $10 million from day zero, because we needed to hire 30, 40 engineers to build what we were going to build. So in our case, it was almost like, if you didn't think you could raise, you can't really start the company, because you can't sort of drip your way into it, unfortunately. Which is a huge leap of faith on the investor side of, do you think these people have the juice to actually build it? Will they actually, once they build it, will there be customers and so on? But at the seed stage for us, it was, we have all this stuff to build. We have pretty good signal. I've talked to a few folks, they think it's kind of interesting. Please come in. When we did the A round, not much later, about 8 months later, the signal data was customers and banks and fintechs reaching out and saying, are you ready yet? Are you ready yet? Are you ready yet? Mm-hmm. And that's really gratifying, but it's also scary, because you're like, realistically, we could have stayed another 6 months stealthily and been less stress in the organization. But when you've got all of this customer demand, you react to that by either say, go away, don't talk to me, or you start to accept the demand. And the moment you say yes to accepting demand, you lose a little bit of control over what you're going to build in your roadmap because the customers stretch you in different ways. And therefore, we needed more capital to support that use case. So the first time was we just had to. The second time was customers were creating a barrier to us to be successful if we didn't have more capital to work with them. And then the third phase, I'll tell you in a few months.
To be continued.
That's great. Stephany, what about you? How did you know?
You know, I would say I'm going to come back to my sort of financial planning background here for a minute, which means that I like spreadsheets and I like budgets, period. How much is it going to cost? How much do I need to save? You know, that kind of thinking. And so very similar to Peter, you know, to build an infrastructure business, which is what Orem is, right? There's no consumer app. It's a very different build from the very beginning. And it is very capital intensive well before it produces revenue, right? As they say in payments, it's a 3-year slog. That doesn't mean we're not producing revenue now, but at the very beginning, you're not going to immediately have customers and traction like you might if you were launching consumer products. When we launched LearnVest, the amount of money we needed for the engineering scope, for the app we were building was much more constrained to and wrapped around a set of targets around customer acquisition and customer utilization. So I think for those that are listening, you know, tactically speaking, there are very different things that are going to be your signal, whether you're a platform business, you're an infrastructure business, you're consumer facing, you're fintech, you're not fintech. There's lots of variables here. But I think what is important and maybe not as commonly talked about, and again, my roots bias me here, is to sketch a little bit of a forecast, not a perfect one, but like, okay, so that's probably about 6 engineers, you know, it's small, medium, large work. If it's 6 engineers and the sort of average rate is X, well, that's $1 million a year right there. Okay. And then what other investments do we have to make? Cloud service provider, marketing costs, whatever, you know, again, high level. And ultimately that gives you sort of a baseline sense of, can I get this off the ground with money from my own bank account? The answer might be yes, you could get started. Can I get this off the ground with a lot or a little? And then that guides how and when to think about going out to market. I think there are kind of 2 scenarios that I see pretty commonly. There's raising on a pre-product, pre-revenue basis. Usually that's going to work best for teams that come from backgrounds like Peter, 2, 3, 4, either bigger companies with the experience of building or 1 to 2 well-known technology companies where there's a belief that you have been through that experience, that you can probably build something of value. Probably more commonly would be the path where you begin to build a small version of your product, a proof of concept, which might be where a lot of this audience is. And you're going to find that some degree of traction proves out that value. So as Peter said, in his universe, that was like demand coming from customers. When are you going to be live? When are you going to be live? There's a signal for everybody. It's just knowing what your signal is and being able to say, there's 1,000, there's 1,000,000, whatever there is on the other side of that door knock, and quantifying it in a way that when you get in front of investors, shows that there's conviction, not only in you, because of course you have it, but from your users. And those are things that I think, tactically speaking, help you give a better signal to yourself. And ultimately, as you go out into the institutional fundraising world, going out a little too early has its risks because you may be underdeveloped in your thinking and you may miss a chance to have a really great opportunity with certain funds, but they don't come in that early or you're not far enough along. So I think doing some homework to talk to other founders, call me and Peter, now you know us, talk to people in your network, get early feedback, try to really triangulate as much information as you possibly can, so that you're working from a place of advantage when it comes to information. And for that person in the chat who asked, you can find us on LinkedIn, Stephany Kirkpatrick, super simple. And ultimately just get advice. There are tons of founder communities. There are lots of networks like this that I think help, kind of guide. And for me, kind of, we knew that we had an opportunity as soon as we touched on the massive problem. There's $72 trillion of money in America that moves on a 50-year-old system that has never been modernized. And we have absolute critical path demand for that money, your money, to be made available in real time. The size of the market alone was enough of a push. And the second variable for us was the right team. We had secured the right advisors who committed early on and the right founding team to come together who had what you call founder market fit, right? So we try to build products that have product market fit, but investors like Roli also analyze us from the perspective of founder market fit. So what I'm doing is adjacent to what I was doing before. It would be way less believable for me, Stephany, financial planner, financial planning tech background, to go build something in the healthcare space. It's possible, but it's less believable. So those are also things that kind of play into that signal of readiness. Do you have expertise in the category? Can you build a team that has expertise? Because you're stronger together when you have a couple of folks at the table and you're not a solo founder with no team, no product, no revenue. So it's really, I think, also triangulating some of those variables and identifying that readiness factor.
Amazing.
Yeah, I would double down on the team and fit side of things. Like, institutional investors will very quickly understand, is this a team that's harmonic and is working together, harmonized? Or are they just sort of aggregated and they're kind of like not connected and stuff like that? And so don't underestimate the non-verbal cues that happen in those meetings. Even on Zoom makes some of those cues harder to track. But the reinforcing, the saying, I really enjoy working with my other team members, that sort of stuff is huge.
I could
Especially
not
at the beginning.
Yeah, I could not agree more. During the pandemic, I helped co-found a company and we actually imploded. Unfortunately, I have a bad story. We raised a great seed round, never met each other, never met the VCs, but the team did not work well together at all. The founding team and the whole company just shut down in a year. So, I cannot emphasize, I agree 100%. Team, I think, is pretty much as critical or even more critical than the idea itself. So Roli, over to you. We've heard from the founders, but I would love to hear from a funder perspective. What do you look for, right, in a company? And what are sort of the key components or building blocks that founders should get in place before even approaching a VC? Because you don't want to go too soon and lose all the traction. And I've heard this a lot and I've seen it a lot. VCs, it's a small world. They all talk to each other and you hear something on the golf course. I turned this company down and suddenly nobody wants to touch this company. So what would your advice be in terms of what do you look for? And also from your perspective, your advice, when is the right time for a founder to go look for VC funding?
Yeah, no, I'm going to kind of repeat many things that Stephany and Peter have already said. I've doubled down on that team chemistry. And one, I think solo founders is in many ways for me a yellow flag. I wouldn't say it's a red flag, but a solo founder just makes me feel like if you're not able to inspire more than one of you to really join in your journey, how are you going to build a company, right? So for me, I think it's that team, the chemistry that Peter mentioned is very important. I would double down on that founder market fit, right? And I would actually extend that further. It's not only important for you to really have people from the industry who truly understand and deeply understand the problem that the customer is solving for, but also when you are actually ready to start pitching, really show that you understand the user problem or the customer problem, right? And that could be in the form of demonstrating number of customers you've spoken to. That could be demonstrated in the form of traction, like, hey, we have X number of customers in our pilot, or Y number of customers are interested. Just any early signals to show that there is a real problem, that someone is going to be willing to pay for it and are willing to, at least in the near term, without really writing a check, is willing to take their time and energy and do a pilot with you, right? I think that traction just takes it to a different level. So I would say you demonstrate that you do understand your customer problem and show that to the VC, because they're looking for that. They're looking for that early traction. The third thing that I look for, which came in spades with both Peter and Stephany, was humility, right? There is no matter how much you understand an industry, there's always, the industries are changing, the markets are shifting, and there's always things you don't know. So if the story comes along with saying, hey, you know what, I had this amazing idea and I knew exactly what to do it, and we got it right from the first start, I think what that signals to me is you're fooling yourself, right? And you're not willing to learn. And so many of my conversations with Stephany in the early days was really her trying to say, hey, look, we are starting to build this company. How do I think about my sales strategy? How do I think about my customer success? What should I think about? How do I structure it? It indicated to me that she was very curious, wanted to really understand how to solve a problem, and was open and willing to even share, things that were not going well. So be humble, be human. And oftentimes what I've seen is founders who come in super polished and always in the state of, hey, I know exactly what to do because I've done this for many, many years, and I will tell you what needs to happen. All I need from you is a check. It generally doesn't really it doesn't feel real, because building a company is constantly changing and evolving and requires you to constantly learn and pivot. And so if you don't have that openness, it doesn't work. So that would be the other thing that I would add, in addition to founder market fit and showing traction, is just learn along the way.
No, that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to talk about next, which is, this is again for all three of you, but we can start with you, Stephany. Leadership has really changed, right? Leadership as a founder has really changed over the past few years. In the past, we weren't really allowed to be human, right? Babies crying in the background, dogs barking. I right now almost apologize to you all because I can hear my dogs barking in the background, but I stopped myself because we all have learned to be a bit more human. So I'd love to understand from you, starting with you, Stephany. So really, how has this all changed? How has leadership changed, in the past few years for you as a founder?
Gosh, there's many ways I feel like I want to answer this question. I think there's a couple of things I want to try to touch on. And I noticed in the Q&A, there's a question about what's it like to be a woman going through this experience. So I'll talk about that. Before I do that, I think what I talk a lot about with my coach, who's critical path for me, by the way, if you are thinking about founding a company, having an executive coach is very powerful. And the reason I say that is because the things that got you in the room before, the reason you are successful in your corporate job or the company you work at today, are not directly going to be the things that will make you a successful founder and CEO. And those are things that I think for me as a leader, previously, I was always a great right hand. People loved me to be their right hand person because I execute, I'm organized, above all else, I'll deliver. I'm unafraid to ask for help. And through that process, I became very good at having the answer. I wouldn't say being smartest person in the room, because that's absolutely never true, but being confident to have the answer. And if I'm not careful, as I think about leadership in the company with the executive team we've built, and frankly, with all the teammates now, 70 that work at Aurum, I'd be minimizing the potential if I always knew the answer, or if I always said the answer, even if I'm not right. And so for me, that's been one of those really big areas of personal investment and growth, which is to lead a company from literally nothing to willing something to exist and believing in the impossible without doing it in a way that is, well, what does Steph want? What does Steph want? So that's one thing I think a lot about. The other thing I think a lot about, and I think has changed rapidly, in many ways, exclusively for women, not maybe entirely exclusively, but very specifically, is cancel culture. So leadership today, right? I've never met about probably 60% of the 70 people that work at Aurum. We are getting the company together for the first time now that we're in a much safer place post-pandemic-ish. In a couple of weeks. So I'll get to meet all of those people, but I've had to build human connection and belief and followership and belief in the impossible from right here in what used to be my 5-year-old's bedroom, now converted to an office with no shoes on. And what I think about all the time is the distinction between what I believe personally and what I do in my personal life and what I want to be true inside the company at Aurum. And something I say often is, we're not a family, we're a company. I don't run it like a family. I don't say, hey, family, hey, Aurum fam, I say team. I think a lot about the fact that we're going to have to make hard decisions. There will be employees that don't work out. And as a leader, how to set the standard for excellence without being grueling, right? And I think about these headline moments where you see other founders in the headlines for things they've said in Slack, recorded on Zoom. We've all seen some pretty, heavy stories. And I think as a leader, it weighs on me greatly that what I naturally, instinctively might want to say and what is appropriate to say as the founder and CEO are now things I have to really think about. And then the last point I'll touch on is, the obvious question. I'm a woman. It's very unusual to be in a payments business, but even more unusual, only about 2% of women ever get institutional venture capital. And I think that is going to change. And I'll be very honest, I've been so lucky that not once did I experience any setback ever from being a woman. I have observed it in the wild. But I come from a place of privilege when I say that, I have been well treated, respected, and certainly had doors opened, not because I'm a woman, but never had a door closed because I'm a woman. But I did find, and I still find, that the people I want around the table, and I think are the right investors and partners for Aurum, and ultimately, on the board and everywhere else, are people who value that I am a whole person. I sleep at night. I have kids that have to go to school. Sometimes I have an emergency like Peter had today, and I got to dash out. I've been on board meetings where a member of my boards had their kids wander in, and it wasn't distracting. It was humanizing, right? So I do think that letting my guard down a little bit, if I want to have a third kid, I'm going to have a third kid. I'm not going to worry about that because I can do both of those things, right? Run a company and be a woman. So I know that it's, hard to hear the statistics, but I do think that pressing ahead and believing I deserve this opportunity, I have a great idea, I can do this, and I will do it, are kind of key ingredients in overcoming a lot of the imposter syndrome that comes with being a founder, and that ultimately comes with being a woman who may feel like they have the deck stacked against them in terms of the sort of traditional path, because ultimately everything's possible. And so for those that are out there thinking about founding something, in the middle of founding something, halfway through building something, I think just being really true to the fact that whoever you are today is whoever you should be when you're fundraising. Be authentic, be you, and be transparent about the things that are going to be part of the value system in the company you create. Because I think that will ultimately also help attract, as Roli said, investors that see through to the real you and care about the real you and want to nurture the growth you're going to go through. Most of us founders were never founders before, and we've never been CEOs. And the trajectory of our jobs, if we're doing our jobs right, is only going to get harder because every day, every week, every month, we encounter something in the business we've never been responsible for before, right? So while maybe I've managed 200 people, running a company of 70 is fundamentally different and way harder, right? So it's also, I think, just again, having that humility in thinking about your leadership style and leading from a place of, as we say at Aurum, good vibes and good intentions, leading with a value set so that when you make decisions in the company, you can tie them back to your values. For us, that was important from the very beginning, and today still drives a vast majority of our decision-making. It drives our recruiting, it drives our focus on diversity, and it drives our interaction model and all of our philosophies, all the way from how we think about compensation to communication, remote work, and everything in between. It's all grounded in sort of the same leadership principles and the same values. So obviously lots to say on this topic, but
I mean, it's
double down. Sorry, Donna, just double down on the fact that be human. And as a woman founder or an executive, just remember you belong and you deserve to do it. And that, even though the numbers don't show it, there's a lot of momentum of funds that are actually looking for you and are looking to support you. So don't step off the opportunity just because you're a woman, because this has to change and the momentum is there. So double down on what Stephany said. Just believe in it. It's going to happen, and you deserve.
That is so inspiring from both of you. And I was just going to ask you both, or all three of you actually, to talk about, just one thing you want to leave the audience with. I think you both have nailed it. So Peter, I'm going to give you like quick, like just one liner. What do you want to leave the audience with today? Just because I have to get to the Q&A, the chat is blowing up. So yeah, I'd love to hear your one takeaway for today.
So I think we can integrate this into the leadership and the authenticity side of things. If the most important thing I believe for a founder is to be convicted as to what they want to build and to be passionate about it. And it can't just be a side hustle. It can't just be, hey, this was interesting, because everyone will see through it. The investors will see through it. Your team will see through it. And that authentic, this is it. I'm really committing with my whole heart, my whole mind, everything. Everyone wants to be on that team. And people don't want to be on the team that's just like, yeah, you know, if it works out, it's cool. If it doesn't work out, no big deal. So if you want to go down this journey, and trust me, I'm all in. This is my 11th go round or something like that. And some of them complete F-ups and died, and that's okay too. Believe in what you're doing, and everyone else will resonate, and they will see the real you as a result.
Oh my God, I am so inspired. I have goosebumps right now. I really, really hope, you know, the audience has taken back so much from this. So thank you for like this amazing perspective, amazing insights, tactical learnings. And I just wanted to jump into the Q&A just because we've got some really great questions from the audience as well. The first question I'm going to take is it okay for a startup to go directly for an institutional round? And what MRR would be needed to go this route? Either of you can, any one of you can take this one.
Depends on where I can take this one. Depends on where you are, in what stage you are. For me, if you're really early stage and have a prototype or a product that you can start testing out with, or getting pilot customers, that without revenue, that's fine too, right? I think it goes back to demonstrating there is a real need, and there is a set of customers or users who would actually invest their time and energy to try out that product. That's a strong indication. So it doesn't necessarily need an MRR. Now, if you're looking for a later stage investment, so series A or B, yes, at that point you do need to have some demonstration and traction of revenue. But if you're early stage, is demonstrating the need and demonstrating the early traction with pilots, that's sufficient. And so revenue isn't that important, at least from my perspective. Curious to hear what Peter and Stephany you've seen when you were out there doing your first institutional investment.
I think my vote is it just depends. So I don't think there's a clear rule. If you've got a crazy founding team and you know what you're going to do and you need 10 million bucks, don't try and nickel and dime it with an angel round. It's the time. If time is the important thing and you've got investors that love you, take the money. If you're building a consumer product where you want to get some market signal beforehand, I'd build that consumer signal beforehand so that when you're talking to those institutional investors, there's a better rationale of why your valuation should be where it is. So I don't think there's a bright line. I know that you can raise money at every stage up into probably C and D, kind of on no MRR if you've got an amazing product and everybody knows the revenue's coming.
I would say that's very similar kind of experience in my tenure as well. And ultimately, there are other metrics besides monthly recurring revenue, MRR, for those that don't know the metric. Daily active users, monthly active users, booked revenue. So in my business, right, as a B2B B2B payments business, we don't recognize revenue like SaaS companies. There's a lag between bookings and realizing revenue, but you can do a lot on booked revenue. So I think it very much depends on what kind of business you're running. Being thorough about what your kind of classification of venture capitalists that you're going after. Are they generalists? Are they specialists? What stage do they think about? Also will inform what kind of metrics they're going to be looking for.
Great. So this next one, I think, might probably be, something that a lot of our, the audience is thinking about. The question is, I'm in a full-time job while building my product on the side, using my salary to fund the offshore dev team in place. How would this be viewed by investors, considering I would move into my company full-time? Would I get funded? So I know, Peter, you said like go in, all in. So this probably is the opposite of what we just talked about, but I'd love to get, your perspective on this question.
I'm all in on the side hustle. I think that's totally cool. And some investors will be like, amazing, great founder ethos, like you're doing the double job for that sort of thing. That's not what I was saying earlier. It's more, if you're doing this thing on the side, that's your startup and you're not really convicted about it, and you're just sort of saying, hey, maybe this is going to work, maybe it's not, that's different. I'm burning the midnight oil to build my new thing, and I'm tending to bail on my old company and go to my new thing as soon as I raise money that I can afford lifestyle. And lifestyle just means like whatever it is to make general ends meet. I think investors will love that.
Great. No, that's a great answer. I think you nailed it. So the next question that I kind of like in a similar vein, or not similar, but there's this constant push and pull between services company and product companies. And there's this constant question of, product companies, it's very clear you're building a product to your target audiences, you have all of the pieces pretty much nailed. But what about a services company? The question is, how do I, is funding available for a services company? And if yes, how do you go after that? Roli, do you want to take that one?
That's a good one. There is funding available for services. It's definitely, I would say, relative to pure product, there is a lot more demand for pure product companies versus services companies. But there are investors that do invest in services, as long as you're able to demonstrate that you're able to scale your services and be able to have it at a higher margin because of technology. So it could be technology-enabled services that do have a lot of opportunity, but pure services, in relative to pure technology companies, there's fewer investments happening. But technology-enabled services, massive opportunity.
Well, I think on that front, venture capital is not the only place to get money, right? That's like the sort of path people think they're supposed to be on. Depending on the kind of company, I've seen lots of things in the chat about nonprofits and different kinds of businesses, SMBs, small business loans, non-dilutive debt. There are vastly different ways to get capital to get your business off the ground, all with different forms of commitment and cost structure ultimately. So I would just encourage folks to think broadly and not be pigeonholed into, how do I force this to work in venture capital? Because there are some industries that don't work as well, to Roli's point. But that shouldn't preclude you from starting a business and getting out there as an entrepreneur.
Great point. Okay, I'm going to take a last question because we're coming up for time, and there's been so many great questions. I wish we could get to all of them, but the last question for the panel here is a good one. While raising your first institutional round, how much is it the story versus actual metrics to secure an investment? If a story is the most important part, what do you look for in a story? And again, I guess this is more for you as an investor or a funder, Roli, but I think it applies to everybody, right? Because both Stephany and Peter, you have raised successfully. So maybe, Stephany, we can start with you. How important is the story versus metrics? That was the question.
The story is really important because, as Peter said, as Roli said, as I've said, your heart has to be in it, right? And so, perfecting storytelling about the opportunity. I'm solving a very technical problem that the vast majority of even venture capitalists don't fully understand. And it's my job to simplify it in terms of quantifying opportunity and why my solution's unique. So that does require really strong storytelling. That's not to say like, look over here, don't look at the bad things, right? That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is really practice, hone your public speaking skills, get on Zoom and practice with your mom if that's what it takes. I'm like unabashed about practicing because you are going to be stronger, even if you have to think on your feet. And ultimately, I think storytelling is the ability to convey conviction, as Peter said, coupled with demonstrating a problem that maybe had not been obvious until the minute you walked in the room, and now nobody can unsee that problem. If you can make that happen, that's very powerful.
Roli, anything to add from a funder perspective there?
No, you're looking, as a funder, we're looking for the conviction and the passion more than anything else, because especially in the early stages and seed stages, the problem statement and the problem statement will remain, but the solution may evolve. And so you're really investing in the conviction that the founder is demonstrating around the problem. So the story is very important.
Peter, any last words to add before we hand it back to Colin?
Look, I will say that in the pre-seed through at least the B, story almost is the thing. Unless you've got like some runaway tear thing where the metrics are going berserk, there's so much that's going to happen in those first year or two that it's about conviction and enthusiasm, and we run under a cement mixer to still deliver the product, all those sorts of things that you can't convey with yesterday our user count went up by 10%. And that may be awesome, 10% growth may be fantastic day over day, but the belief that you can take that growth and do something with it comes from storytelling and being evocative and being able to communicate well. And our game as fund founders is to sort of suspend reality. Like Stephany and I created something out of nothing, which shouldn't exist, right? But we did it with force of will. And that is conviction and that is storytelling to get other people to believe that you can do it in the first place.
Thank you. Oh my God, this has been such a great panel, such a great session. We can go on for hours and hours and hours talking about this topic, and I wish we had way more time. Sorry to all those whose questions we were not able to get to today, but we will post a bunch of resources and follow-ups. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Colin.
Thank you so much, Donna, Stephany, Peter, Roli. That was great. Hopefully everybody found value in learning from all the different angles of all of your expertise, from all of your experience. So on behalf of everyone on our team, thank you so much for contributing your time and expertise today. For those of you still on the call, thank you for joining us. If you would like to give us some feedback, we're going to drop a link to a survey in the chat. So appreciate that. Hope you all enjoyed this. Donna, team, thank you so much for doing this again. And to all of you still online, we see you online soon. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye.